So what I'm going to do today is jump right into the material. I'll address some questions next class, but I just want to get into or finish off the vision lecture, and then hopefully we'll also get to the next lecture on context. If not, we'll do it next time. So we talked about how to set a vision. You also went through the exercise yourselves, how to set your own vision. But why? Why go through this effort? And again, what you did was literally the tip of the iceberg. What we recommend is going through the process of writing a vision, which could take weeks and months, and rewrite again and again and again, revision, so to speak. But why do we set a vision? There are a few reasons which I will elaborate on. The first one is that people, individuals who have a vision, an explicit vision, who actually write it down, overall controlling for other factors, are more successful in the long run. Second, they're also happier. And remember the story that I told about the South African freedom fighters. When they achieved their goal, their vision of a free South Africa, they immediately experienced a low. Why? Because they needed to have another vision, another ideal. Having an ideal is the most practical thing a leader or a non-leader, a person, can do. Also with NASA, when they had the vision, reaching the moon by the end of the decade, there was a lot of inspiration, there was a lot of energy there. Afterwards, not only were they less successful, but they were less happy within the organization. And finally, it creates resilience. If I know what I want to achieve in my life, if I have a vision, I'm much more likely to overcome difficult experiences, much more likely to overcome the natural, inevitable vicissitudes that I go throughout my life. That applies to an organization, as we will see shortly, and it also applies to the life of an individual. I want to address the book from which you read the chapter last week, Built to Last. You read the chapter that focuses on creating a vision. But I want to give you the context for this book, because this is one of the books that has been the most influential. It still is one of the most influential books in the area of leadership. It has suggestions for leaders, for people running organizations that go beyond today's fad. They're really deep, insightful comments about the way we can run an organization, and they apply it, and they have applied it to schools. They've applied it to business organizations. That's what the research was about. And they apply it to countries. How do you create an organization from a school to a nation which is built to last? This is the sample that they chose for their study. They were all institutions that they were the best of the best. How did they know that? They were widely admired both by the people, and also they asked Fortune 500 CEOs, what are the companies that you admire most? And they identified the visionary, or they later found out that they were visionary companies. They didn't know that from the outset. This was an exploratory study. They wanted to see what makes an organization great. They looked for organizations that made a difference in the world. The world would not have looked the same without these companies. And you'll see these companies such as Disney, Sony, General Motors. Ford was the company. And all these companies were founded before 1950. The reason for that, they didn't want to choose companies that were great because of one CEO. It was beyond one leadership. They wanted to see companies that transcended just that one individual. That was great between one leader to the next leader and to the next. Most of these companies were founded long before 1950. The newest ones were just before. So this was the sample. And what they did, and this was the smart thing about their study, they didn't compare these companies to your average organization. They chose other excellent companies, but that were just not as widely admired. They didn't make as much of a significant difference. Great organizations, but just a little bit below. This was their comparison group. The reason why they chose great companies but not the extraordinary companies was because they wanted to identify what is it that 1% that takes a company from being a good company to being what they ended up calling a visionary company. So a visionary company that was chosen was Procter & Gamble, has been around for a very long time. They compared it to Colgate, very good company, but not on par with Procter & Gamble. Sony, certainly a visionary company that has changed the world. They compared it to Kenwood, great company, but not on par. Hewlett-Packard, they compared to Texas Instruments. Boeing, McDonnell Douglas, also a great company, not on par. Johnson & Johnson was compared to Bristol-Myers Squibb. Ford with General Motors. Again, two great companies, but Ford has transformed the way we look at the automobile. It's more of a visionary company. General Electric with Westinghouse, and finally Walt Disney with Columbia Films. Again, all great companies on both sides, but the visionary companies have that edge. And here is what they found. The fundamental distinguishing characteristic of the most enduring and successful corporations is that they preserve a cherished core ideology while simultaneously stimulating progress and change in everything that is not part of the core ideology. They have a core vision. They know what they're about. And they communicate that vision over and over and over again, whether they were founded in the 1860s or whether they were found just recently. Going over and over and over again with this core ideology that doesn't change. This is, as I said before, it's like their 10 commandments. The 10 commandments haven't changed for thousands of years. And probably will not change for a very long time. The same with the core ideology of the organization. This is what we're about. And yet, we're flexible. We change. Januszian thinking. No change and change together. Because they understand what cannot or shouldn't change and what needs to change daily, especially today. Procter & Gamble today changes much quicker than it did in 1860. Because the world changes much faster. Technology renews itself constantly. Another thing that they found was that the most successful companies exist first and foremost to maximize profit. They found that to be a myth. Remember the structure of the book, myth and reality. This was a myth. These companies, rather, making money is important, but primarily guided by their core values and a sense of purpose. They knew where they were going. Being more profitable, being more successful, which they are, as we'll see in a minute, was a byproduct. Now, I told you always to think about it on two levels, the organizational level and the individual level. The same with highly successful individuals. Their success is a byproduct of their doing what they're passionate about and what they're good at. They don't explicitly think, okay, now I'm going to make it in the world. Yeah, of course it's important for everyone, or most people it is important. We like that. But first and foremost, they're focused on what they're passionate about, what they believe in, and what they're good at. And they find the overlap between the two. The same with great organizations. Here is the success of visionary company. In terms of long-term performance, those companies that weren't created by 1926, because there were some who were created in the 40s, it was extrapolated backwards. If you invested $1 in Wall Street in 1926, your dollar would be worth $415 today. If you invested $1 in one of the comparison group companies, remember General Motors, Kenwood, Colgate, Columbia, and others, your $1 would have been worth $955. That's good return on investment. If you had invested in one of the visionary companies back in 1926, your dollar today would be worth, $1, would be worth over $6,000. So it's not that they're successful by a little. This is unbelievable. This is remarkable. It's not the only research that shows how great companies with vision are able to succeed and far outdo all other companies that do not have a vision. John Kotter from Harvard Business School studied companies and looked for companies that had a very strong core ideology, a vision which they communicated over and over again, shared values. And his results are no less remarkable than Built to Last. 4 times more revenue growth, 7 times more jobs created over a similar period of time, 750% more profitable, and stock price increase 12 times more over the long haul. Having a vision pays. Having core values pays. The question is then, does any vision pay? Is it okay to just have a random vision that I believe in and that will make my company successful or me as an individual successful? Here is one shortcoming of Built to Last. Their answer is primarily yes. But other research has proved them wrong. This is on your optional reading list. Again, read it over the summer if you have time. O'Reilly shows that some visions are greater than others. Not all visions are created equal. And he identified 3 main characteristics. Again, very simple. 3 main characteristics that make a vision successful. 1, they have high performance standards. Remember going back to what Professor Snook said, to what we talked about a lot with appreciative inquiry. They see the seed, they see the potential, and they say, this can grow into a tree. This can grow into a highly successful company. We expect a lot from you. And these expectations, as we'll talk about next time, become self-fulfilling prophecies. They have high performance standards. They have a caring attitude. Don't mistake this caring attitude with being there to please. They're not. The managers and the leaders of these organizations are not there to please. They're there to do the job. And they respect their employees. They're demanding, they're tough. Not all visionary companies are perfect for everyone. Not everyone enjoys working at Ford or Disney, though you would think they do, but it's not an easy place to work for many people. But overall, they have a caring attitude. They respect the individual. And finally, they don't just have a generic vision. Integrity, empathy, or whatever. The vision actually means something. It's something unique. It's something like maintaining the Disney magic. Or it's something like making technological contributions to humanity. It's something that's personally meaningful to that organization. Now look at these 3 and ask yourselves, how am I doing as an individual? Do I believe in myself? Do I have high performance standards? Remember, ideally, as Professor Hackman says, the best goals to set are ones that we have 50% chance of attaining. Am I pushing myself? Do I have a vision of making my life and the world a better place, a compelling vision? Have I developed my emotional intelligence qualities? Because it's very difficult to attain a vision just by ourselves, especially if it's a big vision. We need to work with others. How am I with interpersonal relationships? Am I respectful toward others? And finally, have I been able to find my own unique, to use Professor Stone's words, corner of the sky? Which is the place where my strengths and my passions meet. This corner of the sky, this zone of great leadership. Have I identified it? Because this is what ultimately leads to success. Another thing, an important thing about a vision is that it's positive. Not any vision will do. Let's look at 2 leaders of this country who communicated a vision, who were both eloquent, who were both smart, but communicated a vision in a very different way. Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan. Jimmy Carter, as president, was always recognized as arguably one of the smartest presidents that we've ever had. But he failed in the White House. He lost by a landslide, surprisingly. to Reagan. And the question that many students of leadership, many political thinkers have asked is why? And one of the main points, I mean, there are a few points. One of the main points that's identified is because he focused on the negative. He focused on the problem-solving approach. His most famous speech is called The Crisis of Confidence. It became known as the malaise in this country. And here is how he prepared for the speech. He went around to the people of America and met just people on the street, went to farms, and wanted to understand from people what was the problem in our society. That's what he asked them. What is wrong with our society? This is the exact opposite question to appreciative inquiry. It's not that he asked it and then asked, and what is great? That's the only question he asked, and that's how he constructed his speech, his vision for the country, which he was hoping to lead for another 4 years. Let me read you an excerpt from this speech. I want to talk to you right now about a fundamental threat to American democracy. The threat is nearly invisible in ordinary ways. It is a crisis of confidence. It is a crisis that strikes at the very heart and soul and spirit of our national will. We can see this crisis in the growing doubt about the meaning of our own lives and in the loss of a unity of purpose for our nation. Now, was he right? Probably. Wasn't detached from reality. After all, he went and talked to the people. But that wasn't enough. And the people didn't have confidence in him and didn't vote for him. Let me show you a speech given not long after that by Ronald Reagan. This speech was given when power was handed over to him. Things were not going well when he took over. This was January 1981. Here is his speech.
The economic ills we suffer have come upon us over several decades. They will not go away in days, weeks, or months, but they will go away. They will go away because we, as Americans, have the capacity now, as we've had in the past, to do whatever needs to be done to preserve this last and greatest bastion of freedom. In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. If we look to the answer as to why for so many years we achieved so much, prospered as no other people on earth, it was because here in this land we unleashed the energy and individual genius of man to a greater extent than has ever been done before. Freedom and the dignity of the individual have been more available and assured here than in any other place on earth. It is time for us to realize that we're too great a nation to limit ourselves to small dreams. We're not, as some would have us believe, doomed to an inevitable decline. I do not believe in a fate that will fall on us no matter what we do. I do believe in a fate that will fall on us if we do nothing. So with all the creative energy at our command, let us begin an era of national renewal. Let us renew our determination, our courage, and our strength. And let us renew our faith and our hope. We have every right to dream heroic dreams. Those who say that we're in a time when there are no heroes, they just don't know where to look. You can see heroes every day going in and out of factory gates. Others, a handful in number, produce enough food to feed all of us and then the world beyond. You meet heroes across a counter, and they're on both sides of that counter. There are entrepreneurs with faith in themselves and faith in an idea who create new jobs, new wealth, and opportunity. There are individuals and families who take taxes, support the government, and whose voluntary gifts support church, charity, culture, art, and education. Their patriotism is quiet but deep. Their values sustain our national life. Now, I have used the words they and their in speaking of these heroes. I could say you and your, because I'm addressing the heroes of whom I speak, you, the citizens of this blessed land. Your dreams, your hopes, your goals are going to be the dreams, the hopes, and the goals of this administration, so help me God.
What a difference. Again, the times were not good. But what hope he inspires. This is appreciative inquiry at its best. Appreciating the strength, the greatness of this country, of the individuals in this country, focusing on it, and it appreciates and it grows. It's not that in 1981 or in 85 or in 88, as we'll see his last speech, things were perfect. There were always bad things, but there are also always good things. And while he didn't ignore the negative, he also focused on the positive. Ronald Reagan defeated Carter by offering Americans a vision that was as optimistic as Carter's was pessimistic. This is from a PBS documentary. By the way, as an aside, one of your assignments this week, or your assignment in your groups this week, is to establish actual concrete goals. One of these goals can be to watch great speeches. I can't tell you how many times I've watched Reagan over and over. I can't tell you how many times I've watched I Have a Dream speech. We learn a lot by watching this, and he is a great communicator. According to Peter Senge, few, if any, forces in human affairs are as powerful as a shared vision, for good or ill. So vision is also what brought Hitler to power. Vision is also what oppressed millions of people around the world. You know, a vision, and this is why I like this quote, is a force. Just like electricity is a force. Is electricity good or bad? Well, it depends. If you electrocute someone with it, it's bad. If you bring light, it's good. Any force can be used for good or ill. Vision has also brought about some of the most amazing, remarkable feats in human history. For example, it was vision that ended slavery. It was vision that brought this country into existence. It was vision that put a man on the moon. It was a vision that brought the computer to our homes, that democratized the automobile, that brought us to the jet age, that made people happy, that made technological advances in the world. It was vision, the force, the power of vision. One of the greatest feats of all time is the greatest leadership feats of all time. Again, you may agree or disagree with its value, is the creation of the atomic bomb. What happened then? What was the context for it? The context was that US, the world was at war. Germany was working on an atomic bomb. The German scientists were hard at work at it, and they had some of the best scientists in the world. So there was a real danger that they would create an atomic bomb before America would. So what Roosevelt did, prompted by Einstein, bring together the greatest scientific minds of the time. They took them to Los Alamos, and together, under what was called the Manhattan Project, were working secretly on creating the atomic bomb. People like Fermi, Szilard, Richard Feynman, Niels Bohr, Edward Teller, Nobel laureates, and others were brought together to this place to work on the atomic bomb. Now, they were not only brilliant, these individuals, again, the greatest minds, They were also highly individualistic and with big egos. They knew they were great. And it was, initially people thought, or they thought it would be like herding cats. Not easy. Much more difficult job than even Summers had as a president. Robert Oppenheimer was brought and had to run this organization. And they succeeded. Again, whether you agree or not, in terms of their outcome. They succeeded. And what does Robert Oppenheimer attribute this to? A common shared vision. It was a remarkable community inspired by a high sense of mission, devoted to a common purpose. What was their common purpose? What did they see it as? Saving the free world. And they worked hard and they worked together. And it was a remarkable feat. The same applies to any organization, large or small. You get people together and you get them to work on a common goal, a common vision. So what's your vision? You see, people with a vision, as I said, are far more successful. As a leader, if you have a vision, you'll get much more loyalty and commitment from your people. People will be happier coming to work if they know that they're working towards something great. They will be much more motivated and they will produce much more for that shared vision. Beyond the basic pay, it's impossible to motivate people only through external rewards. Yes, to a certain point, but beyond that, you need the heart to be in it as well, and that's the role of a vision. A leader's dynamism doesn't come from special powers. It comes from a strong belief in a purpose and a willingness to express that conviction. Cousins and Posner. How do you communicate it? And now I'm going to talk about communicating the vision specifically, but also more generally. Communication clearly is a key component of great leadership. What do we think about when we communicate? First of all, while not being simplistic, to communicate simply and repeat over and over again our basic messages. I'm going to elaborate on each one of these. We want to inspire through images, through metaphors, and through stories. And most importantly, we want to embody our values. We want to lead by example. Wharton professor Michael Useem has this to say about a company's strategy and a company's vision. I quote, "Business managers often make the same mistake, failing to grasp the crucial distinction between telling people something and delivering that information so that it really sticks. Indeed, poor communication is one reason why many companies that have devised brilliant strategies fail miserably in executing them. When leaders make their strategic intent abundantly clear, as Walmart's management has in proclaiming its strategy of low prices every day, employees know what to do without requiring myriad further instructions. Achieving that clarity, however, is often far more difficult than managers appreciate." Achieving this clarity is critical. You see, the most difficult leaders to work for are not ones that are tough or difficult or highly demanding. They're ones that are unpredictable. Ones where you don't have clarity in terms of, what am I supposed to do? What am I here for? What is the organization here for? And in that respect, in needing clarity, we're no different than animals. Let me give you an example. This is a study that was run by Pavlov, one of the founders of modern psychology. And you know Pavlov studies with stimulus and response, where a dog salivates when it hears a bell. Let me share with you a study that's not widely known about Pavlov, but one with implications not just for animals. So Pavlov conditioned a dog that every time when the dog was shown a circle, the dog would get food. Every time when the dog was shown an ellipse, the dog would not get food. After a while, what happens, again, this is conditioning, the food was shown, the circle was shown, the dog would salivate. The ellipse was shown, the dog would not salivate. Very simple, straightforward conditioning. But then he took it a step further, and he did this repeatedly with dogs. The next time he showed the circle, he made it a little bit more like an ellipse. Just a little bit more like an ellipse. The next time he showed the ellipse, he made it just a little bit more like a circle. Initially, no problem. This still looks much more like a circle. This still looks like much more than an ellipse. But he continued this. And he made the circle more like an ellipse and the ellipse more like a circle. And so on, until the point when they were indistinguishable. When the dog could not differentiate between what was originally the circle and what was originally the ellipse. At that point, the dog quite literally went ballistic. It started barking, whining, running toward the door, trying to get out of the room. The dog wasn't shocked, wasn't hurt, nothing. It drove the dog crazy, insane. This has implications for leadership as well. Clarity is key. The most difficult boss to work for is one where you don't know what he or she expects. Where one morning they come in and they're all smiling and love you, and the next day they scream at you. It's much worse than working for a boss whom you know is always tough and demanding. Clarity, consistency. Now, how do we attain this clarity and consistency? Through simplicity and repetition. The challenge for leaders is to avoid the simplistic. How do we do it? Going back to a quote that I've used before, attributed to Oliver Wendell Holmes. I do not give a fig for the simplicity on this side of complexity, but I would give my life for the simplicity on the other side of complexity. Profound quote. So when we come up with a vision, it's not just a vision, this sounds good, let me have it. It's a vision that we think about, that we truly work on every single word, every concept, every idea there. Is this what I'm about? Is this what the organization is about? Have a vision and then the revision. Over and over. And then we can attain this simplicity on the other side of complexity, when we truly understand it. Remember Lincoln, in his letter to his nephew, what he wrote at the end was a very long letter. He said at the end of it, "My apologies for the letter being so long. If I had more time, it would have been shorter." The simplicity on the other side of complexity that takes time. Da Vinci, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. The simplicity on the other side of complexity is also a part of Januszian thinking. Right? How do you reconcile the simple and the complex? Well, you work hard and you get to that simplicity. Let me give you some examples. HBS alum Jim Burke, CEO of Johnson & Johnson, spent 40% of his time repeating the credo over and over. Credo is Johnson & Johnson's vision. You should read it. Fascinating. Over and over again, just communicating that. Robert Eckert, who is CEO of Mattel, says, "It is not enough to communicate your vision in the elevator, in the cafeteria, in the street, on the phone, on the planes, and through email once or twice. You have to do it over and over again. Constant and consistent communication, while at times sounding like a broken record, is the single most reassuring thing I can do for all stakeholders, employees, investors, customers, media, and senior management. And it's always the same basic message, which is our vision for the company. Consistency over and over and over again. No ambiguity there. The company employees know what this organization is about. It may not be right for them. People may not have liked what Reagan had to say, but then they had a choice. Vote for him or not. And the overwhelming majority voted for him. People have a choice whether they want to work for Mattel or not. But they know what they're in for. No surprises, no ambiguities. Citibank went through one of its greatest crises back in the early 90s. And the person who got them out of this crisis is John Reed. This is what John Reed's student, who later became the CEO of Citibank and chairman, Victor Menezes, has to say. Basically, John Reed focused the bank on a few things and communicated a simple plan to the board, the regulators, and the street. That struck me as a great example of effective leadership because it galvanized the organization into pulling through. John simplified the extremely complex Citibank organization, made cost-cutting a priority, and tied every one of the bank's activities to a set of deliverables. Citibank stock was at $6 at that time. It was on the verge of bankruptcy or a hostile takeover. And he got them out by communicating very simple messages to the stakeholders. This applies not just for business. It applies to politics. Simple message repeated over and over again. It also applies to teaching and to parenting. Jack Welch once said that business is not rocket science. Teaching is not rocket science. Parenting is not rocket science. But the fact that it's simple does not make it easy to implement. And one of the ways to implement it effectively is to identify that simplicity on the other side of complexity and then repeat it over and over and over again, which is exactly what Marva Collins does. Marva Collins, who is my role model, the person because of whom I teach, probably the greatest living teacher. She's been offered to be the Secretary of Education twice, once by Ronald Reagan, once by Bush. She turned them both down because she loves to teach. Now, Marva Collins herself says, teaching is not rocket science. She has 3 basic messages that she communicates to her children, mostly children who were given up on by the school system, school dropouts, and she transforms their lives, and they become successful, every single one of them. She's now a leader of a new education movement, transforming entire schools and school systems. 3 basic messages. Believe in yourself, and she believes in them. In other words, she sees the seed, and she sees the potential. Take responsibility for what you do. Don't blame others. Don't blame the government. Don't blame parents. Don't blame your neighborhood. Take responsibility. That's the second message. And finally, hard work. There are no miracles. You need to work hard. 3 messages that she repeats over and over and over again every single day to her students. And she has transformed individuals, communities. And my hope is that eventually she'll transform the world of education. The other things that leaders do very effectively when they communicate is they evoke emotions, and they do it through images, metaphor, and stories. Look at the Bible. Without a question, the most influential vision that has ever been put forward. Now, whether you believe it's divine or written by people, that's not the point. The point is that it has had more influence on the way the world looks today than any other vision ever put forward. How is the Bible written? Stories. Yes, it has the 10 Commandments, which are abstract concepts, but around them there are stories. How effective is it when the story is told about Moses, who tends to the little lamb. Much more effective about communicating that for leadership you need compassion than saying it, for leadership you need compassion. A story can be worth 1,000 words. Or the story of the Good Samaritan. How much more effective and influential is it than Kant's elaborate theories, which are saying very similar things, but not in a story? You know, when students come to me after, I've been teaching here for 8 years, students from 8 years ago or 5 years ago come back to me, they don't remember the theories that I told them about, but they remember the stories. They remember Marvel Collins. People remember stories. That's what captures people. American presidents' research showed that those who used more stories were also ones to be evaluated as most charismatic and also great. The same applied for metaphors. This is on your reading list, this study. Noel Tichy, scholar of leadership, winning business leaders use the power of storytelling as effectively as our most gifted public leaders. Again, it applies to teachers, politicians, and others. And it doesn't just apply to the vivid description. It applies to the entire vision. So if one of your core values that you wrote about is courage, come up with a story that communicates courage to you, whether it's a story that you have witnessed directly, something that you did, or something about others. Make it real, make it vivid. No matter how marvelous the vision, the effective leaders must use a metaphor, a word, or a model to make that vision clear to others. The greatest leaders do it. Nelson Mandela's image was of a rainbow nation. How simple, how beautiful. And this is how he avoided all the hatred that the other people, expected in South Africa after the fall of apartheid. This was the vision that he communicated over and over again, in words and in deeds, bringing together the people regardless of color of skin. Reagan's speechwriter said about him that if he was reading from the phone book, he could make it exciting, because he would always create a picture. When he gave his first inauguration speech, he talked about a $1 trillion budget, or the budget in $1 trillion. And to communicate to the people how much $1 trillion was, he brought the image of the Empire State Building, and next to it, dollar bills, one on top of the other. An image. In contrast, Carter, his personal assistant, said that even at the end of his 4 years, he still wasn't sure what Carter wanted to do in terms of the budget. Now, Carter was brilliant. He had all these statistics here. Listen to his speeches. He knew it by heart. But he wasn't able to reach the simplicity on the other side of complexity, which is critical. Let me show you another excerpt from Ronald Reagan's speech. This is taken from his farewell speech. Here is an image that he creates.
The past few days, when I've been at that window upstairs, I've thought a bit of the shining city upon a hill. The phrase comes from John Winthrop, who wrote it to describe the America he imagined. What he imagined was important because he was an early pilgrim, an early freedom man. He journeyed here on what today we call a little wooden boat. And like the other pilgrims, he was looking for a home that would be free. I've spoken of a shining city all my political life, but I don't know if I ever quite communicated what I saw when I said it. But in my mind, it was a tall, proud city built on rocks stronger than oceans, windswept, God-blessed, and teeming with people of all kinds living in harmony and peace. A city with free ports that hummed with commerce and creativity. And if there had to be city walls, the walls had doors, and the doors were open to anyone with the will and the heart to get here. That's how I saw it and see it still. And how stands the city on this winter night? More prosperous, more secure and happier than it was 8 years ago. But more than that, after 200 years, 2 centuries, she still stands strong and true on the granite ridge, and her glow is held steady, no matter what storm. And she's still a beacon, still a magnet for all who must have freedom, for all the pilgrims from all the lost places who are hurtling through the darkness toward home.
Stories have power because stories humanize. I want to read to you 2 articles written about a sad situation, a tough situation in South Africa, about the AIDS. This is from BBC, May 15, 2005, May 18. Quote, almost 1 in 3 deaths in South Africa are caused by AIDS, making it the leading killer, according to research. In 2 provinces, the figure is as high as 40%, says an unreleased report by South Africa's Medical Research Council. Research was based on the study of death statistics for the year 2000. Let me read you another story of the same issues in South Africa. On October 25, 2002, 26-year-old Zanele Mavana is slowly dying in her home in a rural village of the Eastern Cape province. Her 3 children, ages 10, 8, and 4, watch as their mother's bones become more visible. She no longer has the strength to get out of bed. Her diarrhea has stained the sheets as she waits helplessly for someone to clean her. To reach the nearest hospital, she would have to walk for hours, first through the open hilly fields surrounding her home, followed by mud roads, then gravel roads, and finally a tarred road. Zanele Marvana died on December 6, 2002, leaving 3 orphans behind. Stalin, an evil leader, once said, a single death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic. Unfortunately, it is right, and it's important for a leader to be able to tap the power of the story, the power of the individual, to humanize. Now, there's research about this. Martin and Powers took MBA classes, and what they did, they divided them into 4 groups. They divided them into 4 groups, and they did the following. One group, and they told them all about an organization's policy of layoffs, and they wanted to communicate that the policy was actually humane. The first group, remember this, the first group, they were told a story about how they practiced humane layoffs, how they were benevolent and generous. The second group of MBAs got statistics, and these statistics showed that the company practiced less layoffs than any other comparable company. The third group, they were told a story and given statistics. The fourth group was given the company policy about layoffs. Now the students had to evaluate how humane the company was, how much they supported the company. Significantly, group 1 and 3, the group who was just told a story or the group that was given statistics and a story, these companies, or the students evaluated these companies most highly as the most benevolent and generous. Stories humanize, stories are significant. And what you need to do as a leader, what we need to do as leaders, is to identify our stories, stories that inspire us, and then through emotional contagion, inspire others. I'll see you on Wednesday.